you are back here in the dark waters and you are a member to the website, Dark Waters has done an interview with Dr. Karl Shuker for you. However, there is one problem. The sound is off in the interview. Yes, Dr. Shuker needed a better microphone, but we had already paid him and started the interview. So we ask that you bear with us through this interview until we record the part 2, where we will be going into the evidence discovered during the Dogman camps. Yes, we have a official PhD in zoology who will be reviewing our evidence. Yes. No longer are we going to subject ourselves to the fools in the community. Because there are nothing but fools who have opinions, but have no credentials to stand on. Yes. I hope that you enjoy this interview.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is James Williams, Dog Waters. You listen to the Dog Waters Radio Network. This interview to me is very important because I wanted to get someone on who actually has a true educational background in some of the things that we deal in and touch on. So we deal with a lot of cryptozoological issues or cryptozoological issues. But Dr. Shuker has a degree in a doctor's degree,
Yep.
zoology. Doc, I'm gonna call you Doc moving forward, not to mess up your name. All right,
That's fine. Yep.
Doc. Talk to people, talk to the audience a little bit about zoology, where your degree came from, because it's a doctor's degree. Tell us a little bit about your actual background, and then you and I are gonna just jostle back and forth and dive into some topics. No pressure, no nothing. It's just
Okay.
two guys from two different ends of the planet just talking about weird, crazy stuff.
Okay. Right. Well, you can probably tell from my accent that I'm from England, and I was educated as a zoologist at university, BSc, and then a PhD in pure zoology and comparative physiology. But right from a child, I was always interested in unusual animals, not so much your dogs and cats. Your marsupials and your platypus and things like that. Always interested. When I was about 13, 14, my mother one birthday bought me a book which basically transformed my entire life way of thinking in relation to zoology. And it's a famous book called On the Track of Unknown Animals by Dr. Bernard Hubelmans, who was probably the most famous cryptozoologist of all time, who virtually founded the entire discipline single-handedly. And the entire book is all about three animals that have been reported all over the world, but as yet science does not recognize their existence. And I was totally fascinated by this book. And although I went to explore cryptozoology, I'd got the zoological background as support, but I was always interested in writing, and I always did well at school and university in writing. So I decided to start researching, investigating bibliographically and also in the field, and wrote my very first book, which was published in 1989, called The Mystery Cats of the World, which, as the name suggests, was reports of unusual, unrecognized cat-like creatures reported from North America, Europe, Australia, South America, Asia, Africa, and it did well, and I was pleased about that because that encouraged me to carry on writing, and I started writing articles, magazine articles, periodical articles. I started the famous magazine, Fate magazine, and when Jerome Clark continued with my writing, as did the late Mark Chavinsky, who was editor of Strange magazine in America, and I've just basically carried on ever since. My latest book came out earlier this month on mysterious snakes, and it's my 33rd book. For over 30 years, been my passion, my long-standing interest, really intrigued me. Over the years I've been doing it, some of the animals that were mysterious have now been shown to exist. Major new animals have been discovered. I've written 3 books on
That microphone is giving us a little bit of a problem. I think you started moving again, but I got the majority of it, and I'm gonna work on the audio to fix it. So don't worry about it. So so you actually do you fell in love with cryptozoology, which is amazing. One of the things that we just talked about before I hit record was, and I guess we'll dive into this first because I'm actually looking for answers on how this should be done. And because you're a published author, you ended up doing your research. I'm pretty sure you traveled and visited places and found evidence. I don't
Absolutely, yep.
I don't believe that overall the community that I'm involved in has an understanding of the proper way. And I can speak for myself as well. That's why I'm seeking the knowledge from someone who's done this. The proper processes and steps of, documenting evidence and coming to, you start over the hypothesis. I think this is what it is, a great guess, right? And you work your way to some type of conclusion. And it's really the scientific method, but I wanted someone else to talk about that process, what it looks like, because you've successfully done it. What does it entail going from, for example, I saw that you had a couple of blog posts about like large cat prints, right?
Yep. Yep.
And for the average person who goes out into the woods, like one of the hottest topics right now is Dogman, right? And there are
Yep.
many people who go out into the field, they go looking for Dogman. I don't do that. I'm overweight and I smoke cigars, so I can't run if something chases me, so I don't do that. But
Right.
nonetheless, if you and I are out in the woods, Doc, right? We went on an
Yep.
expedition. We out in the woods,
Yep.
we run across a print that clearly is weird. You know, we want to place our biases and our conclusions on it and say we think it's this. Start with me and mentally walk me through what you would do if you and I were together in the woods and we saw something like that. What would be the first thing that came to your mind?
Well, the first thing, I'd look at it to see if it resembled anything that I knew before, but I always carry a lot of things with me. So once I saw it, if it didn't look familiar, out would come a measuring implement to measure it. I'd do a sketch of it. I would measure it. I would photograph it now with cell phones, and I would then look around in the area to see if there were any fur samples. I'd look for any trails that are going through perhaps bushes or fur attached to trees, anything like that that would suggest what kind of animal had left that footprint. So that's what I would do first of all. Get visual representation of it by a sketch and preferably a photograph. Get metrical, empirical evidence by measuring it and taking note of any fur samples, any disturbance to vegetation nearby, to compare with what is already known to be in that area, perhaps bears, perhaps cougars, we don't wonder what that is. Get as much possible physical, tangible evidence. If you were going prepared and you've got any method of actually taking a cast of that sample, that footprint sample, again, take a cast of it. Do as much as you can to bring back anything that might have DNA in it. Look for any droppings that the animal might have left. Anything that can be scientifically analysed to determine what the animal might be.
Gotcha. So we've done that, right? As you and I, we've done that. We've taken that's physical evidence that we found, right? All right, got it. So we've got the physical evidence. Now we're out there. We decided we were going to go camping, so we spent the night, Doc, and now we hear growls. We hear tree limbs snapping. Weird and strange occurrences are going on around us, right? Common sense tells you to turn on a recorder and try and record that.
Yep.
How else is that documented um, outside of that recording? And if you're in that situation, you want to document it. How else are you documenting that to translate that to some form of hardcore evidence gathering outside of just the audio sound that you can record? That's everybody knows. Turn on a recorder or turn on your camera. But what else would you do?
Obviously, the recording would get the audio. Any camera, if you're going specifically to one area where there has already been reports, it would be useful to have trail cameras put in the area that would be triggered by animals walking by them, light sensitive or motion sensitive, and get those kind of recordings. Obviously, it's a bit paradoxical, but in a sense, you don't want to show yourself because whatever it is, the chances are it's going to be more scared of you than the other way around. Not necessarily, but if it's not going to be more scared of you, then it's going to be dangerous. So, whichever way you look at it, you don't really want yourself directly in positioning yourself there. You want physical. Also, you want independent evidence, uh, observed, monitored, recorded, and machines basically make sure that they record it. That's the most important thing.
And that would be classified as independent evidence. That would be the official terminology for it then.
Well, it would be if it was purely machines that did that. If you didn't have direct input, then the machines were recording. It would be independent because obviously machines aren't living entities. All they're doing is recording what they detect. If a motion detecting camera detects something walking by, whatever it is, it will record it. It won't care whether it's a deer, a bear, a dogman, a big.
All right, here we go. It makes everything you're saying makes all the sense in the world, but I want what I'm trying to do is pull out the terminology um, to the point to where I can also use that terminology again, and also my listening audience understands that terminology moving forward. So when someone says, "Okay, this is observational evidence versus independent evidence," then everybody understands what is actually being said, and it's important because in this field this entire time, I don't know of anyone who's like in the YouTube, radio community who actually explains this stuff to people.
Yeah,
It's more so get a camera, get a microphone, go out in the woods, get a thermal. I hear noise, it freaks me out. But with an engineering background, my understanding of doing any type of research is you're going to gather the evidence and then you're going to come to a conclusion. You're going to print that conclusion or you're going to write a report on what that conclusion is. There's a definite end result of what your experiment that you went out into the field to do. You know what I'm saying? So let the mic settle a little bit and then go start again. You were saying that it's important to compile it into a report. And then after that, what were you saying?
once you've compiled a report, it's important to get professional opinion in a university. Take your report, take the evidence as much of it as you can possibly physically take, and show the people, contact them first of all, make sure that they are interested, don't just, and then take as much as possible and show what you found.
All right, I got you. And just to surmise that, guys, because it's breaking up pretty bad, what Doc was saying is the most important thing is once you've got the report, you want to take it to a university and make sure that before you take it to anybody or somebody who's an authority figure in that field, but before you give it to them, you want to make sure that you contact them and let them know that you're sending it.
I said, absolutely, definitely contact them first. Yep.
And then the last thing you were saying is you were referring to the memory. You said your memory is fleeting, if I'm not mistaken. Repeat that last part.
Yes, the memories are fleeting. When you write something up, when you observe anything, make sure you document it as quickly as possible because memories are deceptive. The longer you leave it, the less likely you are to have an accident. They went to where this black panther was, they looked at it, and the black panther was actually a very large, big, black plastic bag that had been floating along the ground. But someone thought that it was a black panther because there'd been reports of black panthers, and their brain had actually transformed this fleeting sighting of a large plastic bag floating along the ground into a black panther.
And that makes all the sense in the world because our brains try to put things in context when we see them, and they try to rationalize what we see. So we see something weird, and we try and relate it immediately to something. So we access our memory, and we said, okay, well, that looks like a panther. It's black. It's big. It's moving across the ground. They said there were panthers over here. That's a panther, and
Exactly,
that's how the
exactly.
human brain works.
Yeah, you're putting a bias on it straight away. Instead of just reporting you saw something large, black, moving along the ground, your brain says you must have seen the panther, so you immediately say, I saw a black panther moving across the ground.
No, that's exactly what I've talked to thousands of witnesses, and the beauty of literally talking to a witness for hours and hours and hours and looping them and going in depth into their conversation and trying to get them to imagine things. You'll be amazed at how many times a witness will say, "Wait, I realized what I saw. It wasn't a Bigfoot. It wasn't a dog man. No, man, that was a shadow from the angle of the trees that made it look like that was something there. But now that I'm thinking about it, it was nothing." You have to activate that person's memory and get them to go back and be in that moment to see that without the bias. And once you do that, now they're like, "Holy crap, I'm wrong." And most people be like, "Oh man, I'm sorry I wasted your time." But all right, so we've went through the process. Is there a finalized process? What's the expectation once you turn that report into whether a university or to a cryptozoologist, or what would be the expectations that you have, or do you have any expectations? You're just getting a peer review of your evidence, and you just take whatever's sent back, and how do you deal with that final aspect of it?
Well, of course, with that, there are so many possible variables. It depends on the person who is examining it. Is it a person who's particularly interested in that subject, or is it simply someone whose job it is to investigate reports from the general public? So you've got that aspect, the individuality of the person concerned. You've also got how busy are they beforehand? Have they got time to go through it in great detail? Um, so expectations are not just based on what you give to them, it's what they can or do or will give back to you. So you have to take that into consideration at all. Sometimes it's worth actually researching before you give the report into anyone, researching in the kind of official academia who is most likely to be interested in your report. You could give it to someone who absolutely hates cryptozoology and would virtually throw it back at you, not interested. So you need to know before you give it in something about the background of the person you're giving it to know whether you're going to get a sympathetic um, perusal of the report, or whether it's going to be dismissed out of hand because they have no interest. So you have to take that into account as well. My actual website. So I'm pretty well represented. I'd just like to say just one thing before I go. Firstly, thank you for having me. But secondly, when you say about how to document the reports and the sightings that are reported to you, what you're doing is exactly the way to go about it. You're bringing all these reports to the general public. You're encouraging people to report them to you, to put them online, and that's the best possible thing to do. You couldn't be doing a better thing. So I think we all owe you a great debt of thanks for doing that. Long may you continue doing it.
Well, I appreciate it, Doc. I really do. I tell you what,